my biggest concern is the uncertainty around the future, the rise of state-on-state contestation, not just competition, and a number of possible scenarios in the future that could lead to even catastrophic events with no certainty that we can avoid them. It is an independently funded arm of the Russian state whose sole purpose is to pursue the destruction of critical underwater infrastructure. If we were to find ourselves fighting an opponent who had transitioned to autonomous warfare and we had not, we will probably lose. And my job is not to lose, our job is to win.
Welcome back to Defence Talk, Securing a Key Advantage, brought to you by the Council on Geostrategy in partnership with ADS Group and sponsored by industry powerhouse BAE Systems. I'm Victoria Starrick-Summerlin, co-founder at the Council on Geostrategy, and as always, I'm here with my co-host, Paul Mason.
Great to be here, Victoria, and we're back again in a sweltering studio at the height of the British summer. And we're going to be talking today about the Royal Navy and its future and the future of its operations and indeed its kit. Because the era of steady state peacetime patrols is well and truly over. I spotted a picture of the Prince of Wales off Jan Mayen Island, which not many people know even exists, which is a rock in the middle of the North Atlantic, very strategically positioned. That's a signal to our allies and our adversaries that we mean business in that area, one presumes. And the Royal Navy is on course to achieve full warfighting readiness by 2029.
Well, Paul, indeed, today we will focus on the Navy and also on the future of the Royal Navy, particularly when it comes to our surrounding seas and also the High North. Now, I recall last year in December, I listened to one speech which emphasized three constants and two changes we face as a nation. Now, the three constants were the following. It's the sea, is the geography, and also our alliances. Two changes referenced the threats we faced and also the technological advancements and innovation. Now, the speech was delivered by our First Sea Lord and the Chief of the Naval Staff, General Sir Gwyn Jenkins, who we are absolutely honoured and delighted to have with us here today in the studio. So welcome, General. Thank you so much for joining us. And of course, you are the first Royal Marine to be appointed to lead our Navy, and you've been in your role now for 1 year. And we are very keen to understand, how do you see the world? How are you transforming the Navy? And also, how do we engage with our key allies and partners, particularly in the surrounding seas and the High North today? So thank you for joining us.
Victoria, it's great. It's great to be here, and Paul, it's nice to meet you. I don't think, if I'm honest, that 45 minutes is going to be long enough to cover all those topics, but we'll definitely give it a good go. It's a real pleasure to be here. The opportunity to speak about our agenda and how important the maritime is not something that I would want to pass up. So I'm really pleased that you've invited me today. Thank you.
Thank you, General. So perhaps maybe let's begin with the world that we see as of today. When you look at the world outside, what concerns you the most?
So I think, like everybody, like any commentator, I guess my biggest concern is the uncertainty around the future. You know, I grew up in the military at the end of the Cold War, when it looked like we had stability and constancy and economies were booming and the future was bright. It was a great time, really, to be in society. You contrast that with now, it feels much more uncertain and fragile. And with no offence to any commentators that look at the geostrategic context all the time, I haven't met the person who can give me an accurate prediction of what lies ahead. And I think in that uncertainty, the need to be secure in our own environment, in the United Kingdom and particularly in the maritime, has reached a new level of prominence. So it is the uncertainty that is the number one underlying concern. Alliances feel fragile. The rise of state-on-state contestation, not just competition, and a number of possible scenarios in the future that could lead to even catastrophic events with no certainty that we can avoid them. I think it's that really motivates us, I think, at the moment.
So in terms of the practical key threats, that you see and you are addressing right now? What would be the top 3 concerns that you've got?
Yeah, so in my environment in particular, in the maritime, and let's not forget that we are an island nation. We are utterly dependent on the sea for all our data, virtually all our trade, virtually all our energy. In the maritime environment, in particular with the Russian threat at the moment, I see a real growth in undersea capability that we are, if we're really honest as allies, we are struggling to contain. Very capable submarines, a very advanced so-called research program, which is directly aimed at our critical underwater infrastructure.
Googie.
Yeah, exactly. The so-called Googie research. But I think let's not kid ourselves. It's not a research agency. It is an independent arm of the Russian state, independently funded arm of the Russian state, whose sole purpose is to pursue the destruction of critical underwater infrastructure, in particular, in the event of a transition towards war, or just as an economic leverage for the Russian state. So the subsurface systems are a real concern. But allied to that is just the pace of technological change at the moment. And we only have to look at the war in Ukraine and what the Ukrainian Navy, a navy in name, but not in being in the way that we would recognize it, and what it's managed to do to the Russian fleet in the Black Sea, completely neutralize one of the most advanced fleets in the world. That is a wake-up call to all of us. And then allied to that is the challenge we have in the military of transforming our organizations so that we can keep pace with both that threat and technological change. So you asked me for 3, I would say the Russian threat is my immediate warfighting and national security focus. The pace of technological change is something that is transforming the way we do our business. And then my own organizational challenge of changing ourselves so that we can adapt to both those things at a relevant time and pace that does what we need to do for the nation.
Is there a sense in which the maritime domain itself is simply experienced a kind of quantity into quality moment? Because all those things you've talked about, whether it's Googie, whether it's Strait of Hormuz, is distance is just being shortened. Is there a question in your mind of what is the purpose of a maritime surface platform when it is so easy to find it and destroy it through asymmetric force?
So I think there's a few points to that. One is we do have to be careful applying the geography and the specific kind of physical environment of the Black Sea or the Straits of Hormuz to some of our Atlantic space. And the big Atlantic is a very different proposition to some of those quite constrained and even reasonably benign waters. But that doesn't imply any complacency. I think it's just you have to be careful how you apply the lessons and really understand. I kind of describe this as this is, it's an overused phrase, but this is a paradigm shift. It is a fundamental reframing of what maritime power is and how we will wield it, I think. And it is definitely analogous to the big transitions we've seen in the maritime over the last couple of 100 years. And that speech you quoted, I talked about transition from sail to steam, from wood to iron, the birth of the dreadnought class at the start of the 20th century, which completely changed maritime warfare. Then aircraft carriers, submarines, all these massive transitions. It feels like we're in one of those. And much like, as any kind of good historian will tell you, there were plenty of detractors back at those transition times, plenty who argued that steam would never replace sail, plenty who argued that aircraft carriers were irrelevant, plenty that said that submarines were ungentlemanly and shouldn't be pursued as an approach and a tactic for navies of the world. There are plenty now questioning this transition as well. But my perspective as running the Navy is we have no choice here. I think that the lesson to draw from the Black Sea and from now the Straits of Hormuz is if we were to find ourselves fighting an opponent who had transitioned to autonomous warfare and we had not, we will probably lose. And my job is not to lose. My job is to win. And therefore, I don't see it as a risk in embracing this transition. I see it as an absolute necessity.
We must do.
And we have to do it. But the shorter answer to your specific question is, I don't think it makes the crewed warships, the manned warships, irrelevant. I think it just changes the way that you're going to operate them. And it changes the way you achieve mass. It changes what their role is in particular, the command and control and coordination of the uncrewed systems that we're going to need to field. And in the Royal Navy at the moment, all our effort in this regard is on how does that actually operate? How do we fight that with some confidence in the capabilities we will field? That's why we have been running a series of Navy-wide war games to test the hybrid fleet and rigorously test it in each environment as to how we're going to operate and how this would work, where the challenges and the weaknesses are in the model at the moment. Time and again, the tests come back with you still need conventional warships in this mix. They're just further back and have a slightly different role to the way that we would have fielded them in the past.
And of course, we're not doing this on our own, are we?
Absolutely not. And we can't do it on our own.
All eyes are on NATO summit this month, of course. But there's been a lot of activity, general, surrounding the JEF, which is another newer multilateral alliance created back in 2014, and with a particular maritime focus as well. So could you please tell us a bit more about the transformation also happening in other countries, perhaps other JEF countries, and how do we combine our efforts together to transform our navies and to successfully compete with our adversaries in the maritime space in the 21st century, and when?
So this is a major project of ours in the Royal Navy at the moment. And in that speech you referenced at the start, when I talked about the consistency of alliances and their importance, in the forefront of my mind back then was the JEF. Given our geography, the Defence Review last year was very specific. We need to focus on NATO first, not NATO only. We still have global commitments, but NATO first. And within that focus, for us in the maritime, it is the new Joint Operational Area Northwest, which is the North Atlantic and the Baltic, and the nation states around them, that becomes our primary operational plan as part of NATO. The JEF in itself, it isn't NATO, but it is complementary to NATO, absolutely. It brings some unique freedoms and permissions with it, because you don't need consensus amongst all 10 nations in JEF to act. It gives you a political flexibility to respond, particularly in crisis, earlier than we might see, for instance, NATO being able to mobilize with its higher bar of consensus being required for action. The NATO leaders that I talk with, and I was in Norfolk in Virginia just last week speaking with the Joint Forces Command there that is responsible for this area within which we sit. And they welcome the JEF initiative because they recognize that it gives them choice and options in the early stage of a crisis before NATO is has fully mobilized. So there's an operational relevance to it, but there's also a like-minded approach amongst the JEF navies in particular. We already train many of them at our Fleet Operational Standards and Training Centre down in Plymouth. So I was down there just 4 weeks ago, seeing Norwegian ships being trained by our FOST staff. So they already use a lot of our doctrine and our approach to business. And then we have this great opportunity that is the Norwegian strategic deal, Luna House, and the associated Type 26 ship sale with Norway, which has given us this new platform for achieving what we describe as interchangeability between our navies. you'll hear a lot, for those military geeks, we hear a lot about interoperability and the need to be able to work closely with allies. Well, interchangeability is the next step. So interchangeability means it's really agnostic of which nation is in what place conducting tasks. We all act for each other's collective requirements in a way that we fully instinctively, in a very kind of deep way, understand how our ally is going to act in those circumstances and can exchange our capabilities with them. The Norway platform offers us, in Type 26, offers us the opportunity to build that in. We will build identical ships with Norway. We already have Norwegian sailors on the first of our platforms, HMS Glasgow up in Scotland, that isn't launched yet, but they're already working with us on how we bring those vessels into service. The other Jeff navies have seen what we've agreed with Norway and the partnership that we're building there. And to be honest, they want to join that level of partnership. Right. That has given us this great initiative, which is what we call the Northern Navies, the enhanced Jeff Navy concept. We all signed a statement of intent in London as Chiefs of Navy just a couple of months ago, and we're aiming towards a sort of formal ratification of what this enhanced Jeff Navy construct, which covers training and doctrine and capability and equipment. We're looking at what that will be to finalize that agreement in probably in November, if it all goes to plan in Norway. It's a really exciting opportunity, and the key bit for me is they are all very enthusiastic about hybrid navy, the hybrid navy concept. They recognize that we are leading the world at the moment with some of these concepts, and they want to join us on that journey because we're the Royal Navy and because we are still a reference navy that others wish to emulate and follow. That's a great opportunity.
When it comes to this transformation effort and thinking about the hybrid fleet, what role does the industry play? And also, what role do other stakeholders play in this effort you're leading?
Yeah, so industry has a key, obviously industry has a key part. The interesting bit in this new paradigm is the amount of private investment in the research and development that's going on. I think the big primes still have an important role for us, not least because BAE is building the Type 26, Babcock is building the Type 31, Navantia in Belfast are building the Fleet Solid Support Ship. So we still need big industrial, complex program delivery, which will almost certainly continue to fall to the primes. But what we're also seeing is there's a lot of new businesses nipping at their heels here with a lot of private investment behind them. And one example of that would be Atlantic Net. We might come on to talk about the Atlantic series, but Atlantic Net itself is effectively a series of sensors in the Atlantic that will help improve our ability to track this very potent Russian threat to us. It's using autonomous technology connected on data networks. It's a very exciting proposition, world leading. The research and development that has gone into the bids from the consortia that want to provide that net, that is all privately financed. We haven't put a penny into that. The traditional model would have been, again, I'm absolutely not bashing the primes. I think they do have their place, but the traditional model would have been us investing millions with a prime to pay for the development of the project that we wanted. All we've done this time is go to industry and say, this is the effect we need to achieve in the Atlantic. These are the criteria and the circumstances that we want to be able to deal with. You tell us how you would solve this problem. And because we are world leading and because we are the Royal Navy, I think there is a really sensible business case for some of these technological companies to attract a lot of private investment in developing the capabilities we need, because they know that if we can successfully field this, there is a massive global market for these capabilities. So we're giving them an opportunity as well as dealing with ourselves. We can only do that with a new relationship. with industry. It's not the way we would have traditionally done business, writing exhaustive, very specific requirements and then paying for the development of those requirements with big industry. We've gone about this in a very different way. And I think the whole hybrid Navy piece, all the autonomous systems, they're all going to be developed like that because to be frank, industry can leverage more resource and more innovation than we can within our system. That's really exciting for us.
So to be a bit more specific, of course, the main focus is the Atlantic Fleet. And the Atlantic Fleet, has three kinds of sub-focuses, as I call them.
That's right.
Atlantic Bastion, Atlantic Strike, and also Atlantic Shield.
That's right.
What do you need from industry to help you to build up the Atlantic Fleet to the level you want it to be at?
So if I'm making a specific appeal to industry...
I think we've got quite a few.
I'll do this on a postcard, please. So Atlantic Net feels like, Atlantic Net is the surveillance piece of Atlantic Bastion. Bastion is the protection of our critical waters, both the patrol areas for our nuclear submarines and our critical national infrastructure, which is all around the UK in the form of data cables or energy connectors, or indeed sea lines of communication. Atlantic Net is the first autonomous surveillance network that will support Bastion. That feels like that is well on train. We've down selected to a preferred consortia. We should be on contract later this year, and we should see the first sensors in the water by the end of the year. Super energized by the progress we've made on that. On the Atlantic Shield piece, which is the air defence of both our own maritime assets and our contribution to integrated air and missile defence of the UK and allies and northern NATO, for that to be effective, we have got to break the model that says the replacements for the Type 45 destroyers is a bigger Type 45 destroyer. The traditional defense model that we've been locked in is the next generation of capability is just a bigger, more complex, more expensive version of the last. And we've been in that cycle pretty much since the end of the Second World War, I think. And when I arrived as First Sea Lord, the Type 83 was the proposal for the replacement of the Type 45. And funny enough, the Type 83 was another 10 meters bigger, another couple of thousand tons, another 100 people on board, another several £billion on top of the cost. In the autonomous world, I just don't see how that is a credible proposition. You will never be able to build the warship that can fully protect itself in this new environment. So what we're seeking to do is break that paradigm. The Type 83 replacement for the Type 45 is going to be a smaller, less complex warship that we can afford to produce at pace, that we can crew with the way the demographics are going. But it only works if we've got a successful uncrewed escort model to go with that warship, because we still need magazine depth, we still need sensor range, we're going to need electronic decoy capabilities to protect the mothership. So we're effectively going to turn each air defense capability into a mini task force in its own right. What I need from industry is the earlier we can prove that those concepts are credible, and the earlier we can sail uncrewed escorts alongside our warships, the easier it will be to help people visualize and understand exactly how this works. The good news for us is all that technology is available. This is not rocket science. This isn't a punt on a future technological bet. This is deliverable now. There are fleets of large uncrewed vessels sailing around the world right at this moment. Some of British companies are some of the world leaders in this. So actually fielding the uncrewed vessels is not the technological challenge here. It's around the artificial intelligence for navigation that will pass UK regulation. It's around the data networks that will connect these vessels together in difficult environments. And then it's just around the systems that we put on these uncrewed vessels that are reliable enough for us to be able to operate them in harsh conditions. There is a lot in all of that. Industry leading the way with the R&D, showing us what is possible. I am not writing specifications for what these things should look like or how they should be able to operate, because I think others are already solving this problem for us. What will be very exciting, and I think we're close, is if, say, one or two exciting companies out there gift us the initial uncrewed escorts to trial, to experiment with. I think that'll take us a long step forward.
Because what they're looking for are contracts, aren't they? And what comes back from the industry often is that the MOD, the Royal Navy, hasn't really ever bought at scale a serious series of uncrewed fighting ships.
Yes.
And so how do we get over that hump?
So I think the announcements on the Defence Investment Plan are really useful. There is funding in the line now to develop the framework of the hybrid Navy that should give industry confidence that we're serious about this. It's not just the First Sea Lord standing up with briefing exciting concepts. We've actually got some money behind this now. But then again, I think the Atlantic Net series has shown us how we can contract differently for this kind of capability and what it might look like. And of course, come back to the opportunity for industry isn't just selling to the Royal Navy. The opportunity for industry is the global market here, because we are right on our concepts. We know what we need to be able to field in order to be credible in next year's fight, the year after's fight, and proving that these capabilities work will unlock real markets for industry, not just in the JEF, because I'm sure my JEF partners will follow us as we begin to field these capabilities. But there's a global market here. Just in New York, I was in a great conversation with the chief of the Japanese Navy, who are good friends of ours. Japanese Navy was originally founded on the principles of the Royal Navy. They still follow a lot of our approach to business. That's a very exciting market for UK industry there. So yes, it's our pipeline and how we contract, but there is a bigger game here for the UK leading the way in a global transition.
Now, recently, I also have seen the announcement about the joint capability, amphibious capability development between the Brits and the Dutch. Is this one of those first practical examples of working together and delivering at pace and delivering what we need to succeed right now?
Yes, it definitely is. It builds on, it builds on what we have done with Norway with the Type 26, which is with the Dutch, built on our 50-year program of UK Netherlands landing force, which, if we're really honest, atrophied a bit through the Iraq and Afghanistan years, but is still very much alive in the people of the Marines and the Dutch Marines. The opportunity to build identical ships between us and the Netherlands in the UK, so prosperity win for the UK. But on the Atlantic series, we talked about Shield. Atlantic Strike is the capability to be able to punish an enemy if they are foolish enough to attack us. It is deterrence conventional deterrence in practice through carrier strike and through commando marine capability. That is absolutely crucial to the UK, because if God forbid we were to find ourselves in a war with Russia, securing the Norwegian Atlantic coast is essential to our security and capability, because if we lose control of that coast, we will not be able to exercise sea control north of the Greenland, Iceland, UK gaps, and that puts the Russian submarines well within range of the UK with their capabilities. So it all comes down to you have to secure the Norwegian coast to protect the UK and northern NATO. The commandos and the Dutch Marines have a really important role there in rapid reinforcement of the High North, in their ability to hold the Russians at threat in their own bastion areas. The ships are an important contribution to that, as well as of course, there's a global utility to them as well in terms of global responsibilities. So it's very exciting. What is really exciting about it is the concept is built again. It's like the replacement for the Type 45. We've changed the paradigm. We're going to build smaller, simpler ships that we can have more of, that will operate with uncrewed systems, that will give us a better chance of A, getting to our objectives, and B, surviving by being distributed in a battle space where the uncrewed threat is going to be really significant. The answer to that is not to build ever bigger, more complex landing ships. The answer is to go the other way. That is this exciting proposition with the Dutch. And as the Royal Marine commander who instigated the commando force transformation for the Royal Marines, this is a really, really pleasing next step for us that points us into relevance through the 2030s and into the early 2040s.
General, you are transforming the fleet, you are transforming the kit, you are transforming the approach, but of course the Navy, the Marine commanders, it's all about the people as well.
Yeah.
How does is this transformation reflected in your approach to how you lead the Navy?
So thank you for asking that, because I think people rightly focus on the hybrid bit, and it's very shiny and it's quite exciting, and there's, it's perceived as being revolutionary. Actually, I think the really transformative thing we're doing is changing the way that we run the Royal Navy, because back to the threats that I perceive and the risk that we as the Navy don't change fast enough to keep up with the new environment. That is the really, I find it interesting, but the really hard yards of systemic change of a very traditional, quite large organization. And this, I think, is where I get to plow my 36 years of experience of trying to drive change in defence and across Whitehall in various roles. And I get to apply all of that to this organisation that I love and lead of the Royal Navy. At its most basic level, it comes down to leadership. And it comes down to how we select, encourage and energise leaders at all levels of the Navy to lead the transformations that we have to make, some of which will feel very countercultural, some of which feels quite threatening to people who have become very comfortable and established in the way that the Navy works and operates, and we're challenging all of that. And I'm doing that in two principal ways. So one is we are changing the way that we select and assess our leaders. On the record, I've stood up and said that we as the Navy are, and not unlike the rest of defence, are very vulnerable to toxic leadership. We select our leaders in a very traditional, old-style way of top-down assessment from seniors. Essentially, your ability to get promoted is dependent on your ability to impress your boss. That is not a great model for an organisation where I need everybody to be able to bring the best of themselves to work, where we need the ideation that comes from innovative people at the front line solving their own problems to be able to really thrive within our organisation. So we ran a bunch of trials last year on how we provide a better assessment of not just a leader's ability to deliver results, which still is absolutely crucial. I've got to get the ships to sea. I've got to be able to make sure they're ready for war fighting. I've got to be able to deploy my commandos fit and ready to go. But also this ability to motivate their people and make the best possible environment for their people to thrive and be energized and be motivated and well led. And those trials were really successful for us. So we've just run our first command selection board based on this increased criteria that we're collecting from not just a leadership assessment from above, but also the way that our leaders make our people feel and how they actually exercise dynamic leadership. It's not a woke thing. It's not about being popular at all, actually, because I strongly believe that if you go for popularity, you won't achieve results. We know that. Evidence is really clear. It's about motivational leadership. So that's good. That will change the way our leaders act, I think, in quite short order. That will do a lot of the cultural change that we're looking for in the Navy. The second bit, though, is they need to change the way we assess. We train and educate our leaders and bring all of that up to date for the modern warfighting age of a hybrid Navy and autonomy and all that piece. So we've just we've started our program now for completely changing the officers' syllabus from basic training through to senior staff training. That implementation will roll out over the next few years. It is heretical in some ways compared to the kind of model that we've been used to for the last 40, 50 years. But it absolutely would deliver modern leaders ready for the fight that we think we're going to have to be ready.
How do you dovetail that with the fact that if you look at the Ukrainians, for every successful operational group, I'm thinking, the middle strike that we're seeing so effective at the moment in the Black Sea, there is usually unsung a bunch of people sitting in a coffee shop with laptops and iPads, i.e. people in the civilian, but not that far away from the military. Our civilian and military traditions are quite traditionally separate. What are you doing to try and plug in the best of the technologists, the project managers, to be able to spirally develop what your people are coming up with as they make this transformation?
So I think the first thing to say is our people are amazingly technically orientated already now. The young generation that's coming through, I mean, first of all, they are every bit as resilient as my generation ever was. All this guff about the modern generation, that they're soft or they're not able to exercise discipline or whatever. Every generation says that about the generation before. I was told that when I joined. You guys have had trainers at school. That makes you soft. We never had trainers. It's just not true. They are just as brilliant and motivated. In many ways, they're more professional than we ever were, I think. You see them coming in, they drink less. They're much more interested in career progression. They're much more focused on being the best they can be. They are a better generation than we were, I think. But they're also instinctively technologically orientated because they've grown up with all of this stuff. So that gap isn't as big as you might suggest, but we have to be able to bring the best to bear when we need it. I was in Ukraine recently, actually, visiting the Ukrainian Navy. They run a very distributed command and control model in the way they have to survive. They do pull on whatever they can use to get a technological advantage, and they draw no distinction between who provides that. And some of that is kind of necessity of war. Predictably, a bunch of restrictions fall away given the proximity of the threat. But still, the new kind of employment models we've got, particularly around reserves and our willingness to bring people in on lateral entry and or work with them in different relationships. If you were to go onto Patrick Blackett, which is our experimental ship down in Portsmouth, where we are trialing autonomous navigation at the moment, you're just as likely to find civilians supporting our roles as you are military on board that ship, because we just have to be agnostic in bringing in talent wherever we can. There are still challenges around it in terms of some security clearances, depending on which areas we're working in. Of course, you would expect that. We still have to be responsible. But a much more fluid approach to business has got to be the way we work.
Well, in life generally, the most difficult part usually is to start something. So you've started this transformation, you've embarked on this journey. I guess my question is, was it more difficult to start it, or is it more difficult to maintain that momentum and to persevere and to get to the point where you feel, okay, I've succeeded now? And a follow-up question, how does that success look like?
So I think it is way harder to deliver than to start. I think if you have some particular skill sets, the starting is the most exciting, but also in some ways the easier piece. I mean, it is hard. It is about motivating large groups of people. It's about clarity of message and narrative. It's about building detail into your plans so that people can have some confidence in what you're saying, and the delivery of it all. It is about assembling teams of people who really are kind of motivated and bought into what we're trying to do, because this can't be a top-down game. It's got to be enthused people working together to solve our problems. All of that, it takes an awful lot of energy, but it is energizing to do it. Particularly as we start to get success. I think actually the hard yards are now, as in we've got momentum. The Defence Investment Plan announcements were full of Navy initiatives, and I think that is great. We're working well with across the chiefs at the moment to build our integrated force, and all these concepts are related to each other in the different services. But now we have to prove that we can field this capability. We are not, I would say, within the Navy yet on a kind of irrepressible momentum. We've got momentum. It's great, but I think it'll take my whole 4-year tenure to get us to a point where we've got consistent trajectory on the change. So I won't deliver the full hybrid Navy by the end of my time. That's I don't think anybody ever will, in truth, given the pace of tech change. It's going to evolve constantly. But I think I can get the Navy to a point where we've got the change established, embedded. We've changed the way that we select and educate our leaders. We've got buy-in from the whole force. And then I can hand to my successor and their team to continue the trajectory. And I think that's really success for me. It's not an individual delivery of a capability. It's this sense of irrepressible momentum within the service. And if we've got that, then I'm really confident that great people will solve all our problems, and we will deliver the Navy that the nation needs. Invite me back in 3 years' time, and we can do a review of have we managed it, have we sustained it? But I'm energized. My energy levels feel good. I believe in what we're trying to do. I've got some great people around me. So I'm not going to waste this opportunity. We're going to give it the best go we can, because we have to. I don't see the choice.
We do. Well, General, we are very grateful for your time, and we are very much looking forward to witnessing and also supporting you in this journey of transformation. And we also would like to say thank you to all of our listeners for joining us again and listening to Defence Talk, Securing a Key Advantage. See you next time.
Goodbye.
Thanks, everybody.